world could use a little more empathy. So this week on Carlie's Couch, we're discussing the importance of empathy and ways to build your empathy muscle.
Hola, everybody. Welcome to Carlie's Couch. Keeping it moving. 2025. We here. Almost. Fires almost took us out, but we still here. Kind of.
Gang, out here.
Here for now. Definitely during all those fires in LA, I was losing like network. Like my phone was moving slow and my internet kind of was going in and out. So I was texting my friends like, hey, let me know if it's coming my way. Because low key, I was like, I might wake up Vesuvius. And I was like, should I go to sleep? Like, should I be paying attention? But everything's cool. There's so many people though who are losing their homes, and that's pretty devastating. I couldn't imagine like just losing everything that you have like that. So heart out to everybody who is dealing with those issues.
Yeah, not to be that person. I have lost everything in a house fire. It's terrible, but not in like this sense. Like it was a single isolated incident, but like I would also say the palpable energy of just devastation, like for people here. So we'll try to include a link of maybe somewhere you can donate if you feel so inclined to help out a lot of the families here. I was really glad that they were able to save the Getty. I was like, please, God, don't take the Getty.
So was it around there?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's wild.
Oh, it got on the grounds.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting, though. I wonder how certain places were prioritized based on certain things. That's interesting.
Well, interestingly enough, there was because you can actually hear the firefighters. There's an app where you can like hear them when they're talking and doing the things. And the guy was like, why don't we protect the high school instead of these people's properties? And then the guy was like, this is what you pay your fucking taxes for. Like they were like cussing at each other and stuff. I mean, it's stressful. I can't even imagine what the firefighters are going through. Shout out to them and all the incarcerated people who don't even get the opportunity to be firefighters after, which is real crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah, they make them work for pennies on the dollar. It's like 30% of the firefighter force, and then they're not even eligible to be firefighters after.
That's wild. But in cases like this, right, it is important to have empathy and, around what's going on. And Carlie had put this episode together. Tell us kind of what inspired this conversation.
Yeah, weeks ago. This was actually before Christmas when I was thinking about empathy. It's probably the beginning of December because when we were closing out with the Change the Tune kids, we were teaching them about empathy and the importance of empathy and why it's good to be a good person and just what it means. And then I started seeing a lot of posts on social media, shout out to my reticular activating system, about like, be kind to people. You never know what they're carrying. And just because, someone isn't letting on doesn't mean what they're carrying isn't heavy. And I was just like, I think we could have an empathy revolution that would like actually help the world. And we can start with ourselves. And so that's why I wanted to talk about it.
So do you think that there is a lack of empathy or an issue around it, and why?
I do. I think that there's a lot of sympathy, but I think that empathy is the ability to like feel what someone's feeling or put yourself in their shoes. And then that in turn sparks compassionate action for you to like try to actually help and make a difference and want to do things. And I think that on the little chart, people get stuck at sympathy, which is like feeling bad for somebody. But you're not actually feeling what they're feeling. You're not actually sparked to help change anything. You're just like, oh man, that's so sad. Look at those homeless people. Okay, let's go back to partying. Like, and I noticed that when I first moved out here, I went to USC for business school, and I had a classmate who was having a birthday party at this brewery in downtown. And it was my first time ever driving through Skid Row. And I got to the brewery and I was bawling. And they're like, what's wrong? And I'm like, y'all don't see that
so
outside?
sad.
And they were like, oh yeah. Back to partying. And so that's what I'm saying. I think like we become so desensitized to a lot of things that are going on in the world that, even though I know that one person can't change everything and there's governmental institutions and things like that, I think that the little things we can do in our own circle is how we make the world a better place.
And even outside of trying to solve everything, just actually caring, it's weird, for people to be able to be in certain spaces and not like feel something at all about it. But, it's hard for some people to have empathy. And actually, as you were talking, I was kind of thinking, like, I wonder why, and if it is true, I don't think this is something we can actually measure, but if it is true that there is more of a lack of empathy in general, I have a feeling part of it is around the fact that with social media and with, like, everybody seeing everything, I think if people are focused on showing their best, that you can't really acknowledge or have any empathy for like issues. That's not all the way there as a thought, but it's like, oh, that's a you. You know what I mean? Or like, oh, you need to tighten up, type thing, as opposed to getting in a space of like understanding what's really real with people. Because if we're focused on outward and how things look and being together, and people seeing us a certain way, then it's kind of not really possible to see below the surface of other people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that could be a big block. Not only the desensitization of like seeing so much all the time, which is crazy too, like logging onto an app and see somebody getting killed and all kind of crazy stuff. But if people aren't able to be vulnerable, then you really never actually know what's going on with them. And I think that's why authenticity is so important and connects with people so much. Whenever people actually do share those things, like people gravitate towards it.
But then now too, sometimes with that, it's like things can be so performative that even when you show what might be real, and for a lot of people actually that's still not real, it's actually, and personally, when I think about it, like when I see somebody like crying on social, and then I'm off top, I'm low key, I'm kind of have a little less sympathy. I ain't gonna hold you, because it's like, so why are we doing this instead of, and just in general, I think with social and everything, we are just a lot more judgmental, like right or wrong about performative, not performative, whatever. It's like, yes, as I see things, I'm judging it a certain way, and there's certain things that just, all right, you don't feel for it as much because of how they talk about or how they do it, right? Because I'm not putting every L online, all that. Like, you talk to people in real life, and you approach things a certain way if you actually care about moving forward. And I also understand though that everybody's just different in how they deal with things.
Yeah, that's an interesting conundrum, because it's like you want to be vulnerable. We also talked about on an episode, if you haven't listened to it, hyper independence. And also like, so our need to move forward might be head down, let me not talk to nobody, let me actually go try to take care of a thing, when community could actually maybe help us get through that sooner or quick, or like make it easier.
But guess what? It wasn't ever a thing for me to be vulnerable to a million people.
Oh yeah, no, for
so
sure. So
like, it's still, to certain degrees, it's just like, it's different being vulnerable with your friends or with certain people. But I think we're so off on like people knowing us or being our audience and all that. And like, I don't even think we realize that it's performative sometimes. And like, there's so many levels of this, like, to a level, we're all performative, even for being on that, right? Yeah. And for putting anything up, or for even trying to, tighten up how you look for a picture. Like, yes. And there's just so many levels of it that it's like, I don't know, a lot of this just isn't meant for that.
Yeah, I absolutely can see those things. I think something else that might hold people back from being empathetic is it can hurt to a certain degree. So for me, I can get very overwhelmed if I like, because I want to make sure that I'm paying attention. Like when there's videos from Gaza and things like, really showing up, but also like it can take it out of me. Like want to stay in the bed all day and just like despair. Like what can we do? Feel hopeless and way heavy. And so I think sometimes like, I was reading and it said that our brains let us feel a little bit, like enough of something to know, like to turn away from it essentially. And I think that's what happens a lot of the time. People are like, oh, that's so sad. Okay, let's go get ice cream, honey. Like for whatever's going on.
And I'll say empathy 100% is important. And I feel the best way to approach this reality that there's always something crazy going. There's so many wars going on right now. There's so many people right now going through it. There's so many people in my own neighborhood. Like, there's just so much going on. And my only focus, not my only, but my main focus and where I can be most efficient is how I show up in my little circle. And kind of that's it. So it's like, yes, to being empathetic around all of these things happening in the world. And guess what? I have to think about just right in my own life. Like, am I treating people right? Am I, in a relationship where, I'm holding this person hostage from doing that? Like, and that sounds kind of goofy, but like, that's all, like, that's the only way things could change big is if every person was focused on what they are doing in their own space. And so for me in this conversation about empathy, I'm kind of thinking of it, relating to it to, all right, as I see somebody on my way to the grocery store, or with my friends as I'm talking, with the people that I'm working with. Just how do I show empathy, and how am I empathetic in a way with the people in my orbit that makes sense to not add to people's bad day or issues or whatever's going on, and to help in whatever ways make sense to help or show up.
That's the episode, folks. But that's now we're gonna talk about
how to do it. Yeah, but like I kind of want to clarify, like, because you can't
do everything.
Yeah,
and you can't save the whole world.
And as soon as you look at everything, you
feel
like you can't do anything. So.
Yeah, and so that inhibits your ability. But I think that's why the quote is like, I wanted to change the world, but then I realized I can only change myself. And that is where you start. And so that's what this, like when we go through steps, they're going to be focused on what you can do in your day to day to show up as, a better human, a better citizen in this world. Because empathy is so important in relationships and communication and how we fortify as a community. And with all this craziness going on, like the community is so important.
Yeah. So Carlie, she found like a resource source and a doctor who has done some work in this space. Can you talk about them and what they did?
Yeah. Dr. Helen, I think it's Reese, Riess, MD. She wrote a book called The Empathy Effect, and she wanted to improve doctor-patient relationships because she recognized that the medical system is
probably real easy to get stone-faced.
Bro, yeah.
And yeah, we see that all the time.
Oh my God. Oof. And I think it's so important, but her steps also work in other things. And so while some of them seem very simple, think about whenever you're in certain interactions or spaces and you might be like, I probably could do a better job. And so the first one is, she made it real easy. It's an acronym, empathy. So the E is eye contact. And you might be like, okay, I make eye contact with people, but when's the last time you made an eye contact with an unhoused person or with someone who was struggling and when, like, looking at your friends in their eyeballs when they're in grief or when they're caring.
Or just like not being on your phone if somebody's having a conversation.
Being present. And so making sure that you focus on their eyes at least long enough to gauge their eye color is what she said. And make sure you're face to face, make sure.
When you're really communicating. The M in this acronym stands for muscles and facial expressions. Whew. So I'm about to be talking about that resting bitch face. As humans, like, you automatically start to kind of mimic the other person around you. I know Carlie does this all the time with me. No matter what I do, I might cross my leg, then she's gonna cross her leg.
It's mirror neurons, bro.
Yeah, I'd be like, if you don't do your own thing anyway. But
it's my legs are not crossed, sucker.
But by being able to identify other people's feelings and like paying attention, to the what their face is doing and how they're doing, it can help you to communicate empathy by also kind of naturally doing that. I remember a friend talking to me and I was asking like how their family was doing, and they started talking about because their grandmother was like in hospice, and I could just you can tell when people are starting to like, they try not to like fall apart with it, and I kind of see their face doing the thing. And then you automatically kind of also soften a little bit. And it's kind of, signaling like it's okay. Whatever else you do, right? If you touch them or give them a hug or whatever. But just that paying attention to it, is a big part of communication, and like real communication where you're getting more information than just what's being said to you.
Yeah. Body language is so big. And so the P is for posture. So now making sure you're not slumped. Or actually, maybe you are. If they're sad, maybe you do slump over and like listen and really sit with them.
You could tell when you're talking to somebody, because I'd be annoyed at this too. Or when you're somewhere and the person's just like so slumped over, or especially like slumped over and looking at something else or whatever. And it's just like, tighten up. Like, I don't know. I don't like seeing that.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like they're engaged with you. So watch your posture.
Yeah, if you're in a position where like you're actually talking to somebody now. I know all this doesn't necessarily for all the time. You should be watching your posture anyway, though. FYI.
Absolutely, especially as you get older.
Yeah. The A is for affect, aka emotions. So learning to identify what another person is feeling and naming it can help you better understand their behavior or the message behind their words. Now, with that one though, is that like kind of making an assumption on what somebody is feeling? I know when we talk to people, it's okay to say things like, it seems like you're a little sad about that. Where you can kind of lead it to kind of open the door for them to feel a way or to express that. I wouldn't want to making necessarily an assumptions around, how people feel.
I was going to say, yeah, I would just like, how does that make you feel? Because maybe they got fired and you're like, oh man, I know you're probably pissed off. And they're like, bitch, I'm happy. I hated that job.
Yeah.
And so just ask like, well, how do you feel about that before you like jump into something? That way you can meet them with the appropriate energy to kind of, just be on the same plane with them and understand and not put things on them or project, man, you must be so sad about that breakup. And it's like, bro, come on, dog. Like, you don't know.
And then they're going to hit you in 48 hours. But yeah, that's real. That's real.
So I would say asking, not projecting, and then just recognizing all the things that come with that. But I would say maybe also tuning in with yourself too, and just being like aware of what you're feeling and kind of what's coming up as you're in these spaces with these people. T is for tone, because tone of voice conveys over 38% of nonverbal emotional content of what someone is communicating. So this is vital to empathy. Dr. Reese suggests matching the volume and tone of the person you're speaking with, generally a soothing tone to make someone feel heard. However, if they're communicating outrage, moderate your tone rather than matching is more appropriate.
I noticed myself purposely doing that as well, especially I'm not the best with like tone and some of these things. If I was just having a conversation with somebody and just talking, like I might just say something and it seems like, whoa, like being a little direct or whatever. And if I'm in a conversation where I already know the topic's calling for whatever, like, it's more of a sensitive conversation, or how like, I feel like we're so trained, we as in us, but like, let's say if you were going to talk to somebody about an issue, you know how to go around a certain way, I feel right. And so I feel like when it is in a space where it might need empathy and or I'm really trying to communicate with you and make sure you feel like you can speak, I'm gonna listen, all these things, then this is so important. And it is that of, you speak a little differently, you watch how you're saying things, and you do kind of like try to set a certain tone so that they feel safe and okay. I don't think that's too hard. With practice, you got to practice.
Yeah, you got to practice.
Yeah. The H in this acronym of empathy is hearing. Ooh, this is so important. Really, well, I guess it can't be in order because this is an acronym, but I would say this is probably at the top.
Empathy.
Right. Empathy. That's silly. So too often you don't really listen to people, and when you're just having a conversation, like that's real. Don't really listen, or even if they are talking about something, maybe you heard the story before, you done already told them about that guy before, whatever. You have preconceptions, is that the right word? Preconceptions. I knew that wasn't right. Preconceptions or projections or whatever else, right? Or you're distracted and not paying as much attention. But empathetic listening means you're asking questions that help people express what's really going on, and it's helping you to actually continue to hear what's going on. It's not like she was saying earlier, Carlie, where you're just like, oh, okay, so it's this and this and this. Or like a person like me where I like to wrap it up. Like if somebody starts telling a story, I'm like, oh yeah, so da-da-da-da, right? And it's like, no, well, actually, it's like, oh, damn. So I was wrong. But also that means I'm not really listening. I'm just trying to get to the end of the story. And so hearing and listening, of course, we know can take a little bit of work sometimes. And it's probably the most vital piece of having empathy.
Which leads us to why, which is your response. And Dr. Reese said it's not thinking about what you're going to say next, but more so how you're resonating and creating this container for this conversation that you're having with this person. We tend to sync up emotionally whenever we're having conversations with people, and how well we do it plays a role in how much we understand and like them and how they respond to us. And so just thinking about how you're responding, she said, like jump into the thing or telling somebody something or writing them off or not paying attention, they might shut down and not want to share anything with you anymore. I think we could all get better about our responses.
Yeah. And I like to think about like, how do I want to help this person feel? Especially, man, I've had a lot of conversations lately where, a person was disappointed, or, if somebody's really struggling, like, okay, I am not finding a job. I'm like doing all these things. Their hopes were brought up because they were like, oh, I made it to this level. And then no, and something else bad happened. And it's like, talking to the person, I always keep wanting to keep reminding them, like, man, you have a skill, you're great at what you do, like, and just helping them to keep some kind of like feeling, right? So like whatever's going on in a conversation where there's a need to deal with feelings and all of those things. That's kind of how I feel, where it's like, as opposed to like if you're having a regular conversation, like I might not want to like big you all up for, for and give you the big head like just because, but not to say that you can't just like tell your friends they're awesome. And in certain times it's like, nah, you got to help remind people and speak to them in a way where they're not like letting go. And when it comes to these emotions that don't feel good.
Yeah, so empathy, those are all of the letters. If you want to check out that book, it's called The Empathy Effect by Dr. Helen Reese. And the only other thing I wanted to add is with our kids, we practice. So if you have kids or you work with kids and you want to do this, we have them act out scenarios. So we do this for not only, we do it for leadership, for empathy, for all kinds of stuff, friendship, all kinds of things. But you can put people in scenarios and see how they respond and then tell them, okay, give me a bad response. And then they act it out. And it's a lot more fun because then other people can tell you like, oh, when you said that, that was mean, or oh, I like the way that you, put your hand on her back, the whatever. But so we like to act out situations with kids to help them really understand different types of concepts. And I don't know, maybe that might be something you want to do with yourself.
Yeah, and if you can be conscious enough of it, with having certain conversations, I don't know. I always feel like I can tell myself like, all right, do this as if I was role playing and like how I know you're supposed to do it. It could be easy to brush stuff off. And if you say like, okay, let me actually be present and be aware in this conversation, like you could be aware in this conversation. But again, I also think that this is easier to do when it's like somebody's coming to you or, they need to talk, things like that. As opposed to when you're out and about and you're at the grocery store and you're already in a rush and you might see something, you know what I mean? Like those are the times where, I wish I could remember in some interview somewhere a zillion years ago. I remember this guy saying something, and I was like, he's right. He's like, you know what? That very quick thought that you first get when you see like somebody struggling, just do it when you first think about it. Because he was like, what happens? Like, oh, you see somebody, and out here we're gonna see this all the time. But like, you see the guy at the corner, laid out, whatever, and your first thought might be like, oh man, let me see if I got a little something. And that might not be your first thought, but your first thought being like, oh man, he needs help. But then you start to be like, actually, I don't know if I got any dollars.
You start talking yourself out.
And you keep walking, and then you're gone, and then you never did anything. And so I also think in like certain situations, like try to act on like your first thought when you have that first thought of actually recognizing somebody or seeing something. Like helping somebody with something, those types of things where it's like easy to just keep walking by, or it's like, well, let me go back and actually grab this door for them. So it's in those little times where, like I said earlier, like that's your space to do what should be done. It's relative, but like what you could be doing to make somebody's day a little bit better.
And the smallest interaction can change somebody's whole world. It reminds me in undergrad, one of my friends, she said that she saw a person and like looked like he was struggling, but she was on her way to class, but she stopped. She was like, hey bro, what's good? I haven't seen you in a minute, and just talked to him. And then later, he said he was on his way to go unalive himself, and somebody saw him, and that was a big deal. And so like even little moments like that like can make all the difference. It might not be a big deal to you. It might be whatever, your leftovers from lunch given to somebody, but it could change their whole world. I would even go as far to say like when people are on your mind, if you want to do a better job of keeping up with folks, send them a text. It don't have to be nothing crazy. It can be, hey, thinking about you. How, if you want to continue, how is everything? If not, I hope everything is well. You were on my heart. And when I tell you 9 times out of 10, when I have text that to somebody, they really needed it. And they'll bet, man, you didn't know how much that meant to me, or oh man, I really needed somebody, or whatever. And it's like, man, that didn't do nothing. They didn't take anything from me.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that goes back to what we were just saying at the very beginning about those sayings of like, you never know what's going on with people. You never know what they're carrying. And that came up in a conversation I was having yesterday with a client as well, where it's like, you have to practice being a good person because everybody is dealing with something. Regardless, it might not be something you identify, you might not know about it, but no, there's not anybody who just doesn't have anything, going on. And of course, there's different levels to that, and then there's times that are harder than others. But because of that, it's like, why make anybody's life more difficult? Why treat anybody badly or inappropriately? Just like, Why be that force when you could be a more positive force? And a lot of times when we are not the positive force, or you do kind of like bump somebody as you're going, or you don't say something, or you're in a rush and you pass by people, that's a reflection of kind of like things that might be going on with you. And anytime I would have less empathy or just not care or worry about something else, it's because I need to figure something out. So if you're in that kind of space, then look inward and think about how you can get to a space where you can even afford to have that empathy. And in general, this week, just pay more attention around you in spaces where you can show empathy, recognize kind of where you are on the scale of like, are you empathetic? Could you be a little more empathetic? And put that to practice this week.
Yeah, hit us at Carlie's Couch and let us know how that goes. Remember to change the world, change yourself first.